So today we're going to talk about the 20-minute discussion, and just a really quick recap, we've already talked about prayer, and so this is the second of the fundamentals of healthy marriage. The 20-minute discussion, and I specifically call it a discussion and not a conversation. And the reason for that is I think of a conversation as being kind of a, you just kind of talk about whatever, and it's not necessarily, I don't think.
And you can interrupt, like I'm doing right now. You didn't finish a sentence, and I still added something in.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a turn-taking thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think of the word discussion as being implying
turn-taking.
Turn-taking, but
discussion.
but it's a little bit more formal.
Yes.
A little bit less informal, a little less talking over each other.
Yes, that's why I call it a discussion, because I think of a discussion as more formal, more turn-taking.
Yeah. This is an even more formal than a traditional discussion might be, where you...
Yes.
Okay, so tell us about the principle of the 20-minute discussion.
So the principle of the 20-minute discussion is this, that most couples that I've worked with have no idea how to talk to each other. In fact, most people have no idea how to talk to other people. And most of the time what we end up doing is when we're having a conversation, we have thoughts in our mind, things that we want to say. And so we're not listening closely to the people around us.
We're planning what we're going to say when they're done. Or before they're done.
Right, or before they're done. And we break in and so you have these conversations that end up oftentimes with you not feeling like anybody even listened to you or heard what you were saying.
And wouldn't you say that couples who feel like they need help cite communication almost inevitably as one of their major issues?
It's always one of the major issues. Always. Now there's other issues that come up, but communication is always one of the issues that people want to work on because they're struggling with being able to communicate with each other. This tool is what I believe is the foundation of couples communication.
Okay, so this is interesting because these are 5 fundamentals, and most of them are kind of a principle and a tool at the same time.
Right.
So your 20-minute discussion is the tool. What's the principle?
The principle is that when you are communicating with somebody, you need to be able to listen, to hear, and to understand and know what they're talking about.
And that there should be daily time with your spouse where you're listening to your spouse, and there should be daily time to your spouse when you're being listened to.
Right.
And this is just a way to have that planned and scheduled and set in stone to make sure that it happens, because it often doesn't happen spontaneously without it being scheduled.
Right.
Jordan Peterson talks about how couples need 90 minutes a week of talking about the business of their lives as one of the principles on which marriages need to be successful. And that comes from quite a bit of different research.
Yep.
That 90 minutes is basically 15 minutes daily, 6 days a week. And you're about that. You could have said a 15-minute discussion, but because there's turn taking, then it would be 7.5 minutes a person. And it's much easier for it to be a 10-minute for each person.
Not just easier, over the years of using this tool, one of the things that I've found is that 10 minutes is the right amount of time.
Yeah.
That if I give people the permission, because that's usually what it is, they want permission to do a shorter time or a longer time, that usually it's never as effective. 10 minutes each is the right amount of time. Now the other thing that this tool does that's really important, the other principle behind this, is that in order to be one with your spouse, in order to be a unified couple, you need to know what your spouse is doing, and they need to know what you're doing. And this tool, that's what it's about. It's about telling your spouse, this is what I did all day, and about hearing from them what they did all day.
So maybe you should explain the tool, like how is this implemented?
Right. So the 20-minute discussion is a very formal discussion between you and your spouse. Ideally, you would do this at the end of the day. Some people work late, and so they don't have 20 minutes at the end of the day. They work late. They go to bed. So then you could do it in the early morning. But ideally, you would do it at the end of your day.
So when you say it's formal, you don't mean like we have to dress up and speak in formal language. You just mean that it's codified with specific rules rather than
Correct.
being informal and it happens when and how it naturally happens.
Right, exactly. This is not a tool that's meant to just naturally happen. It's something you plan and you carry it out following very, very specific and strict rules.
Okay.
And it's important that the rules are followed. I can't tell you how many times people try to do this tool and they break the rules and then they come to me like, the tool didn't work. And I ask them, why did you do everything I told you to do? Well, no. Okay, then of course it didn't work. You didn't do it.
Okay, so let's set out the 20-minute discussion rules.
Okay, so here is a 20-minute discussion. You schedule an appointment with your spouse to sit down and talk for 20 minutes, that you're going to give yourselves 20 minutes.
It should be 20 minutes of time that you're not going to be interrupted. So
Correct.
it shouldn't be a time that your little kids are going to be running around and coming and asking for drinks of water. Whatever is going on in your life, this time should be a time that you know it's past time for interruptions in the day. We will be able to reliably, most of the time, be uninterrupted during this time.
And it's important that you're not answering your phone. In fact, I would recommend turning your phone off and putting it away during these 20 minutes. You're dedicating these 20 minutes to your relationship with your spouse. And that is the most important thing you can do. So you need to be doing that. You need to be willing to say, you're worth 20 minutes to me.
Okay. So the first thing is we've scheduled and dedicated 20 minutes of uninterrupted time. We've set aside anything that's going to interrupt us during this time as far as possible.
Right. So here's how it works. It's very simple, really. You take 10 minutes to tell your spouse about your day. And you're not allowed to talk about how you felt about the day or anything during the day. No feelings can be expressed or acknowledged.
So it's a
no
report of the day.
thoughts can be expressed or acknowledged. It is just what you did during the day. You're just reporting. That's all you're doing. And here's the important thing. You have to speak for 10 minutes. You cannot speak for 7.5 and then say, well, that's all I have. If that's all you have, then you need to start to break it down into smaller pieces. You have to take 10 minutes. Now, the other rule is you cannot speak for more than 10 minutes. So if you get to 10 minutes and you're not all the way through your day,
that's all of
too
the day you
bad.
get to
That's
talk
all the
about
day
it.
you get to talk about.
And this is uninterrupted time, right? The spouse
That-
cannot.
Right.
You're getting to that next. Okay.
Right. So,
sorry.
but the important
I was
thing
interrupting
is,
you to talk about how we shouldn't interrupt.
Yes. The important thing with this first part is you're taking the full 10 minutes, you're not taking more than 10 minutes. And what you're going to find is some people are going to struggle to fill 10 minutes. And they're going to have to practice until they get there. Some people are going to struggle with only going 10 minutes. They're going to want to go more. And they're going to have to practice stopping. So what you're doing is you're learning how to communicate sufficiently and without oversharing.
So who's the timekeeper? Do you keep your own time? Do you set a timer that's going to go off in 10 minutes?
I usually recommend that you set a timer. Just set a timer, and when the timer goes off, you're done. That's it.
Okay. That's very useful so you don't have one spouse when they're supposed to be looking, checking their watch and like, how many minutes have you gone? How many?
Yeah, ideally you set a timer. Now during these 10 minutes that you're speaking, your spouse is going to be listening. Now, your spouse is not allowed to say anything at all. Nothing.
Nothing like.
They're not allowed. Nope, not. They're not. They can't say. They can't say. They can't say. Wait a minute. Can you clarify that? They can't say. They can't ask any questions. They can't. Nothing. They're quiet. They're listening. Okay. Now, when you finish your 10 minutes,
How important is eye contact during this listening time?
well, it's nice if you want to look like you're attentive. You just need to be attentive. All of these tools, attention is a major component of the tool.
Okay. So it's really important that you're not, for instance, looking at your phone or looking bored.
Well, your phone
The
is
amount
your
of-
phone is turned off and
Yes.
put away. We've
Yeah,
already
we-
established that.
Yes, but just to reinforce that, that
This is a
you're
time,
not flipping through a book.
right? This is
you're
a
not-
time that you are dedicating to your spouse. Nothing else.
Okay.
Nothing else in the world exists for these 20 minutes. You're dedicating it to your spouse. Now, when the first person is done speaking for 10 minutes, then the other person is going to speak for 10 minutes, and you're just going to switch roles. And it's things that are really important are no emotions. People want to share their emotions. It's weird because we're really bad at sharing our emotions, except for when we're not supposed to. Then we're really good at it. So, no emotions in this discussion. No thoughts. It's simply a report of your day. What did you do? And when you're the listener, all you're doing is listening. You don't get to talk. You don't get to ask questions. You don't get to clarify anything. Now, when you finish with that 20-minute discussion, and both of you have had 10 minutes to talk, then if you have any clarifying questions or anything, you're welcome to get into a conversation. But you cannot break into a conversation in the middle of the 20-minute discussion.
Okay. So, a question I have about this is, these are fundamental principles that should apply to all marriages. This is a tool you use a lot with people who are coming to you because their marriage is needing help. Do you think a marriage that's relatively strong, has relatively good communication, needs this formal of a tool?
Yes. No, there's no question in my mind. This is something that every couple should do. And if you do it, no matter how good your relationship is now, it will be better for having implemented this. Your relationship will be a better relationship because now, and I want to tell you,
Even if you already talk about your day and
even if you already talk about your day, this is an important tool that everybody should be doing, and I think we need to do it better.
I was going to say, we don't do this as formally as you're discussing.
No,
it.
we do a kind of an informal version of this
Yes.
most days, but we should do a more formal version of it because I think it is. I think that it's extremely beneficial to every couple to have that moment. I can't tell you how many couples I've worked with who, after doing this, they say, for the first time, not just in my marriage, but they'll say, for the first time in my life, I actually felt heard. I actually felt like somebody was listening and cared about what I was saying.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe their spouse wasn't, but they felt it. And
Because there was quiet attention.
because there was quiet attention, and so this is a key element to a truly healthy relationship.
It's really important in this discussion that you take turns who goes first, so that it's not always one person gets to go first.
And let me just point out about that. One of the reasons that's really important, because it might not be that important if you're always away from each other, but there's going to be days where you're with each other the entire day. You still have to do the 20-minute discussion. You still have to tell your spouse about your day,
Even if they were there for
even
it.
if they were there for the whole thing. And here's a couple of reasons for that. One is your spouse and you may be doing the same things, but you're not experiencing them in the same way. And so it'll be very fascinating to
So-
listen to your spouse.
Even
and-
though you're leaving out thoughts and feelings. It's still,
Yes.
you're going to choose to
What
report differently.
What you choose to report, the order in which you choose to report things might be different. One of you might leave something entirely out, and then the other one will be talking about their day, and they'll bring it up, and you'll be like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." Or you're going to find that, and even if you are just repeating each other, it's still important that you're doing the tool. The other thing about that, and this is one of the reasons that you need to make sure you're switching, because on those days that you are together, the person who goes first will feel like they get to talk about the day, and the person who goes second
Feels like they're filling in the gaps.
yeah, and so you have to make sure that you're swapping those two roles, so you're not having the same. So I think that's really important for that. But it's also important because when you're switching who goes first, you're maintaining a balance of equality. Whereas if one person is always going first, there's an imbalance.
That's one of the things I was thinking. Is the person who goes first, in a sense, gets a different type of attention than the person who goes second.
Mm-hmm. I think
Just
that's absolutely
inevitably.
true. Yeah, absolutely.
And so you want to switch that and not have the sense of prioritizing one of your stories over the others.
Well, and you also have to consider that there is the possibility, as much as we don't want it to happen, there's the possibility that gets interrupted for some major emergency. And if one person is always going first, then all the disruptions are going to keep the second person from having an opportunity to speak.
Yeah.
So there's lots of reasons for swapping. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons.
So this tool, to me, ties into another educational technique that I use. It's a super important part of my educational philosophy, which is the Charlotte Mason philosophy. And this is the tool of narration. And in narration, which Charlotte Mason calls the act of knowing, you recount back something that you've just experienced or read or learned in some way, and the putting into words of what you have experienced is what makes it part of your memory. It's what makes it real to you in a certain way. And narrating your day, which is what you're doing, you're telling the story of your day. You choose what to include, you choose what not to include, you choose how you emphasize it, and the way that you narrate your day, the stories that you're telling about your day, create your life experience in a way that's very different than just going through it without ever stopping to reflect back on what happened.
So it does that, but it also brings your spouse into your life experience and allows them to be a part of.
So
of
you're
that
writing
experience.
the story together of what. So you might not be literally writing it down, but when you're narrating something, you are writing through telling a story, and that becomes your shared story together.
And I'll tell you something else that's really interesting about this tool. When I give couples this tool initially, they're usually pretty excited about it. It's actually an exciting tool. But almost inevitably what will happen is after about 6 or 7 weeks of doing this tool every day, they start to communicate with each other throughout the day, really listening, and it really instills in them a whole different way of communicating. And oftentimes they'll come in and they'll be like, wow, this has been so good, but we don't need it anymore because we talk to each other all the time. And I always try to warn them, don't stop doing the 20-minute discussion, because the reason you're talking to each other all the time is because you're doing this 20-minute discussion. And if you stop the 20-minute discussion, very, very likely you will stop communicating with each other in a way that you feel heard and understood.
Yeah.
And almost
This is-
inevitably, that's what happens. I've had couples oftentimes who say, no, 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 we don't need this anymore. It's so formal, we don't want the formality of it. And it almost inevitably, 3 to 6 months later, they'll call me back up. And they'll be like, Seth, we need to talk to you again. And I can almost always say, you stopped the 20-minute discussion, didn't you?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, yes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
and you're not communicating with each other, right? Yes. Okay, come back in. We'll help you get it going again. It's-
So instead of thinking of it as a springboard principle that you're going to use to leap off of to other places, we're thinking of it as a foundational principle, which we've been talking all along.
Mhm.
These are foundations of healthy marriages. No, they're fundamentals.
These are fundamentals.
But we
the
can think
fundamentals
of
are
fundamentals
foundational.
as foundational.
Yes.
And a foundational principle is set there at the base, and then you build on top of it. But it stays there at the base the whole
Right.
time. It doesn't go away. And so it's really important to think of this as a foundation rather than a springboard.
Right, exactly.
So you were saying that sometimes people feel like this tool fails for them. When someone says the tool is failing me, what are they usually experiencing?
Well, the couple of things that end up happening, and these are really common, and I'm sorry, there are some flies, so they're kind of.
This is a
buzzing
problem.
around.
We live on a little hobby farm, and flies are just one of the hazards of this lifestyle.
So oftentimes what will happen is a couple will do the 20-minute discussion, but they'll include emotions.
Okay.
That almost always will derail the efficacy.
And so why is that
tool.
such a problem? Why does it derail things for people?
Because when you bring up your emotions, it makes your spouse defensive. Almost inevitably. There's a need to defend yourself. Like if you say, I was feeling really bad, then even though I wasn't there, there's still within me this thing that thinks, I didn't do it.
Is it a combination of defensiveness and maybe a desire to fix the problem too?
Maybe
Like
to,
that
maybe
want,
to
that
some
makes them
degree,
want
but,
to interfere in
but
some way.
oftentimes if they want to interfere, even then it's because they're feeling defensive. Most of the time when somebody is wanting to interfere, it's because they're feeling defensive. They, like for example, I feel like it is, and I know this isn't true, but I feel like it's my job to make you happy. So if you're not happy, I failed. So,
I feel like you should have learned this by now, that that's not
well,
true.
I know that's not true. I feel that. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean, I mean, that's a whole different tool we can talk about later. But the thing is that if you're telling me that you were sad about something, I feel like I failed. And so that 20-minute discussion, rather than hearing what you're saying, what I'm hearing is you're a failure.
Okay.
That's why.
So emotions make it be too tight.
And
make
if
the
you
other
say-
person too engaged.
If you say, I'm happy, I did this and it made me happy, I've got the same problem. Then I'm thinking, oh good, I'm making her happy. And so, wait a minute, I didn't do anything. That was something you did. But it doesn't matter. Those emotions are going to affect me in a different way. And they're going to prevent me from being able to hear you.
Okay. Any other pitfalls that are giving people?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Other-
We don't have a lot of time for
Yeah,
this.
no.
but-
Other pitfalls are shortening your time.
Yeah.
Saying, well, I've done 5 minutes. That's all I've got.
So when people say the tool isn't working for them, it's often because they're not giving it enough time.
They're not doing it. So they do 5 minutes and they say, well, that was my whole day. That's it. I don't have anything else to say. You can't say that. If you get to 5 minutes and you're like all done, then you have to go back and you have to break some of those things apart that you did into smaller pieces and tell the smaller pieces. Or another thing is they'll talk and talk and talk and get to 10 minutes and then keep going because they've got so much to say and they don't have the ability they haven't learned how to condense what they're saying. And that's super important that you can condense. So if you go over time or under time, that's going to sabotage the tool and it's not going to be effective.
Getting emotions involved. not giving the proper amount of time.
And interruptions are a big one that people have, that they're like, we did this, and I say, okay, but did you ask any questions? Well, he said that whatever, I had to ask about it. No, you don't have to ask about anything. You just have to listen. So anytime that you interrupt, the listener interrupts the speaker, you've ruined, this tool is no longer effective. It's not going to be effective. So those are the three biggest pitfalls that I find that people run into the most. Is just a difficulty with the timing, difficulty with keeping their emotions out of it, and a difficulty of being able to just listen and not interrupt.
Okay. So what's our homework assignment for the 20-minute discussion? I assume it's going to be implementing a 20-minute discussion.
Yeah, it's go have a 20-minute discussion, following all the rules that have been laid out.
And have it every single day.
Every day.
And you don't have to both be home. You might say, well, our schedules are such that we're not home at the same time. One of us is traveling for work. There are phones.
Yes.
You can find a time that both of you are not currently working, even if it's one of you has a break from work that you're allowed to take your coffee break or whatever.
Yep.
And you say, okay, that's the time. I'm gonna call my spouse and we're gonna have this 20-minute discussion. It's better to have it face to face so that you can look each other in the eye. But we've had periods, and in fact, I think maybe the time that we've done this the most formally is when you've been away for internships or other traveling things,
Yep.
and we were apart for a long time. And every day, at the end of the day, after kids were in bed here, we were on the phone together and we were spending time reporting on the day that we had.
Yep.
And just listening to each other.
I think that's true. I think that's when it's easiest for us, but I think it's important always. But yeah, I agree.
Don't give yourself an out because you're not both home at bedtime.
Right. You can phone calls work, FaceTime on the computer.
Yeah.
If you want to be able to see each other, you can do a FaceTime or FaceTime on your phone. There's a lot of technology nowadays that makes it really easy to be able to do this tool regardless of your situation.
All right. That's a straightforward homework assignment. Our next class will be about the third fundamental, which is date night. That's a fun one to talk about.